As a New Yorker, you might have noticed there are a lot of buildings here. I'm making this video in a building. You might even be watching this video in a building. An important fact about buildings, though, is that they account for about 70% of the city's carbon footprint. But who owns the buildings? The real estate industry. And who contributed heavily to Eric Adams' campaign for mayor? Also the real estate industry. So I want to highlight a piece which was just featured in the Thorn newsletter. It's by Pete Sikora at New York Focus. He writes, New York City's Local Law 97 is the first law worldwide to set specific enforceable pollution limits on large buildings, forcing their owners to upgrade to high energy efficiency and in the process creating tens of thousands of jobs. Whether it succeeds will be closely watched by cities around the world. Okay, so first, Local Law 97 was part of the Climate Mobilization Act, and that was passed in 2019. Local Law 97 will require most buildings over 25,000 square feet to meet certain emissions limits by 2024. The goal being to reduce emissions by the city's biggest buildings by 80% by 2050. And one reason this is so important is, like he said, the precedent it sets. Because New York obviously is just one city, but cities and countries and corporations are being monitored for climate pledges and adherence. So the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit issued a report in March analyzing net zero goals and essentially how likely they were to succeed in achieving net zero by 2050 or, in Sweden's case, by 2045. And for climate action, progress in one place is likely pressure in another. Years of diligent attendance to developers and corporate interests help Adams raise and spend $9.4 million in his campaign, far more than either Catherine Garcia or Maya Wiley. Super PACs devoted to his candidacy also far outspent those of any other candidate. The New York Times reported that more than a third of the money he raised from private sources came from individuals associated with the real estate industry. Key high-level Adams staffers and supporters, such as Brooklyn Democratic machine lawyer Frank Carone, are closely connected to the landlord lobby. And even before his mayoral campaign, Adams received hundreds of thousands of dollars from real estate lobbyists and developers actively seeking his support for their projects, the city reported. There are already worrying signs that Adams will prioritize these benefactors over the interests of the Black and Latino voters at the core of his electoral coalition. His campaign platform includes a section on environmental responsibility, but entirely ignores pollution from buildings, which generates 70% of the city's climate pollution. In contrast, his opponents' platforms made clear that they would both enforce Local Law 97 and allocate funding to supportive programs. Now, as Sikora points out, Adams was the only one not to sign a Green New Deal pledge, and of course now he's going to be mayor. But that being said, massive funding by the organizations and the people fighting this legislation isn't a guarantee that Adams fails on climate, but it's obviously a pretty good indication of where his loyalties lie. But here's the big question. When we see a dissonance between what Adams' donors want and his voters want, who's going to win? Because no one gets hit harder by pollution and climate change than low-income communities. Low-income communities are the most affected by extreme weather events. They're often closest to new fossil fuel construction projects, such as the North Brooklyn Pipeline, and low-income communities have the most to gain from the jobs that Local Law 97 would generate. So with that, it's going to be more important now than ever to keep pressure on and keep showing up and keep organizing, because whatever the Adams administration brings as far as climate action is concerned, the one thing we can be almost certain of is that it won't be of his own desire, but of extreme pressure.